There's a man in your city who hasn't taken a full week off in 9 years. He's awake before the sun. He answers every message within 4 minutes, because somewhere along the way he decided speed was a virtue. He says yes to the extra shift, the project nobody else wants. And underneath all of it is a belief he has never said out loud. That effort is a currency. That if he spends enough of it, someone eventually has to pay him back. He is exhausted. He is respected. And at 51, he has 4 months of savings. 4 miles away, there's another man who works maybe 20 hours a week. He isn't smarter. He didn't inherit anything. But something happens around him that's hard to explain. If effort is the only thing you believe in, deals find him. People bring him opportunities before he's gone looking. Money drifts toward him the way water drifts downhill. Quietly, obeying some rule he understands, and the first man was never taught. Most people look at those 2 lives and call it luck. Sometimes it is. Far more often it isn't. One of them is chasing. The other built something that catches. Money doesn't reward effort the way you were promised. It rewards position, and almost everything you were told about earning it. Work harder, prove yourself, be first in and last out, was not designed to make you wealthy. It was designed to keep you moving, because a person in motion is easy to direct, easy to replace, and far too tired to ask where the money is actually going. 500 years ago, a Florentine watched princes rise and collapse for a living, not from a distance, from inside the room. He carried letters between armies. He sat across from men who had people killed the way other men cancel appointments. He studied power the way a physician studies disease, closely, without flinching. And he noticed a pattern that runs underneath money as cleanly as it runs underneath politics. The men who chased power tended to die with nothing. The men who built positions held them for generations. And the difference was rarely courage or talent or how badly they wanted it. His name was Niccolo Machiavelli. What follows are 7 laws for building a system that attracts money instead of hunting it. Some are cold. One will probably offend you. And I'd ask you to sit inside the offense instead of leaving. Because the ideas that offend you are usually the ones that have been costing you money for years. And the 7th decides whether the other 6 mean anything at all. I've watched people build the first 6 almost perfectly and still end up with nothing. There's also something about Machiavelli's own life, what he actually owned on the day he died, that almost nobody knows. That comes at the end. We start in a forest before dawn. Law 1. Stop hunting, learn the land. Picture a hunter at the edge of a tree line in the dark. He's fast, he's disciplined, he's been awake since 3. He picks up a track and follows it 6 hours through wet ground, closing the distance, doing everything correctly. And then the animal is gone. A snapped branch, a shift in the wind, and 6 hours evaporate. He goes home with nothing. Tomorrow he'll get up at 3 again and repeat all of it. And he'll tell himself the problem was effort. Of course he will. Effort is the only variable he knows how to increase. Now put a second man in the same forest. He isn't running. He's walking slowly, watching the ground, where the trails narrow between 2 ridges, where the water collects, where the animals cross out of habit rather than choice, the same way they crossed last year and the year before. He isn't looking for an animal at all. He's looking for the place an animal will eventually have to be. He sets his snares, he walks home, he sleeps. Here's the detail that should bother you. The hunter works 10 times harder and eats less. Most people spend their entire working lives as hunters, chasing the promotion, the client, the raise, the side income, always sprinting at whatever moved most recently. And the value of what they catch tends to die the moment they stop running. In The Prince, Machiavelli tells a ruler to hunt, but not for the animal, and not for sport. He tells him to hunt so he learns the shape of the land. Because a ruler who knows his terrain can put a small force somewhere a much larger force becomes useless. The lesson was never about the deer. It was about the ground. And your career has terrain. There are places in it where money moves fast and thin, and places where it pools and sits and stays. The map exists. Almost nobody stops running long enough to look at it. 2 people start the same year at the same company. Daniel is the hunter. every project, every weekend. He becomes the person everybody relies on. And by year 4, he's genuinely indispensable. A beautiful word for a terrible situation. Because indispensable means you can never leave. Marcus is quieter. In his first year, he notices something boring. Every deal the company signs has to pass through one small internal process nobody wants to own, because it's unglamorous, and there's no applause in it, so he owns it. He learns it better than anyone alive. He moves himself to the narrow place where everything has to cross. Year 8, the company restructures. Daniel, beloved, exhausted, replaceable, is let go with a package and a card everyone signed. Marcus isn't just kept, he's negotiated with. Because you can fire a hard worker. You cannot easily remove a bridge. If you've been hunting your whole life, comment hunter below. If you're ready to start setting traps, comment trapper. But knowing where to set the trap is worth little if you don't own the ground it sits on. And that's where most people quietly lose 2 decades. Law 2. Own the ground you stand on. There's a phrase for a good job that has quietly cost more lives than any bad one. Stable income. 2 farmers stand in the same field. The first rents it. He works it beautifully. Up at dawn, knows the soil by feel. His yields are the best in the county. Every autumn he harvests, and every autumn he hands a share to the man who owns the land. And every few years the rent goes up, because his success is the evidence that the field is valuable. Read that again. He is making the land more expensive to stand on. Every ounce of skill he adds increases the worth of something that will never be his. The second farmer buys a smaller, worse field. His first 3 years are ugly. His yields are embarrassing. He watches the first farmer's harvest come in and feels something very close to shame. Come back in 20 years. The first has spent 2 decades building another man's estate, and he owns a truck. The second owns a field that feeds 3 families and rents ground to 2 neighbors. Same work, same hours, same weather, decided by nothing except whose name was on the deed. Machiavelli was obsessed with a distinction most people never make: the difference between what you hold and what you are permitted to hold. A man who governs at the pleasure of someone stronger is not a ruler. He's a tenant with a better title. And on the day his usefulness ends, so does his position. In The Prince, he goes further. Whoever makes another powerful ruins himself, because the strength you build for someone else eventually becomes the strength that no longer needs you. Your salary is a tenancy agreement, not a scam. A tenancy. You occupy a productive position, you improve it, and on the day the arrangement stops serving the owner, the arrangement ends. It doesn't matter how straight your rows were. Think about John D. Rockefeller. The story people tell is that he struck oil. He didn't. In the early years of the boom, thousands of men chased wells, drilling, gambling, sinking everything into holes in the ground and losing it in the mud. Rockefeller mostly ignored the drilling. He built refining capacity. He locked down transport. He put himself at the point where every barrel, no matter who pulled it out, no matter who took the risk, had to pass through something he controlled. He wasn't working harder than the men in the mud. Many of them were working themselves to death. He was standing somewhere different. The drillers took the risk. The man who owned the passage took the century. Renting buys you. Today owning tends to buy you every day after today. Now a warning. Because there's a version of ownership that looks identical from the outside and comes apart the second there's real weight on it. Lothar 3. Build your own arms. A city hires an army. The soldiers are professionals. Better equipped than anything the citizens could assemble. Better trained, genuinely frightening on a battlefield. For years the city sleeps well, congratulating itself for being clever enough to buy strength instead of building it. Then, a wealthier city makes those same soldiers a better offer. This is not a thought experiment. Machiavelli watched it happen across Italy for most of his adult life, and he wrote about mercenary armies with a contempt he reserved for almost nothing else. Hired arms, he said, are useless and dangerous. They fight for pay. which means they will not die for you. And the moment your enemy's purse is heavier than yours, the wall you paid for becomes the weapon aimed at your throat. His conclusion: no power is secure that does not rest on its own arms. Translate that out of the 15th century. Your entire income depends on one platform's algorithm. That's a mercenary. Every client came through one referral partner. Mercenary. Your audience is rented from a company that can change its rules on a Tuesday without telling you. Your skill only works inside one employer's system, so it doesn't travel. None of those are systems. They're borrowed soldiers standing in front of an empty wall. And the cruelty of borrowed strength is that it feels exactly like real strength, right up until the morning it doesn't. There's no tremor, nothing creaks. The soldiers simply aren't there when you wake up. Cesare Borgia understood this in time. He began leaning on troops loaned by the French and on Italian lords whose loyalty was rented. He knew what he was standing on. So he pulled those men apart and rebuilt his force out of soldiers who belonged to him and no one else. Machiavelli didn't admire him for his ambition. Plenty of men had ambition. He admired him for noticing his strength was on loan and paying the cost of replacing it before the bill came due. Two founders, same industry, same year. The first grows fast on one traffic source. She scales her spend, hires against the projection, signs the bigger lease. Year 3, the platform changes how it distributes attention. Her cost to reach one customer quadruples in a quarter. She isn't outcompeted. She's evicted. Nobody beat her. The second grows half as fast, doing something that looks inefficient to everyone watching. She collects the names, slowly. A list she can reach directly. A handful of channels she controls. A product that doesn't die if one door close. Year 3, same change. It costs her one bad month. By year 6, one is rebuilding from zero and the other is buying her competitors. Borrowed power leaves the moment it finds a better offer. Comment borrowed or built below and be honest about which one you're standing on. Here's what makes this law hard. Your own arms are almost always weaker at the start. That's the tax, and there's rarely a version where you skip it. Law 4. Let the trap work while you sleep. Years ago I met a man who owned 3 laundromats. I was in my 20s. I thought wealth looked like a corner office and a tailored coat. And this was a man in a windbreaker carrying a bag of quarters. I asked what he did for a living. He said, "I own machines that take money from people who need clean clothes." Then he said something I didn't understand for another 10 years. "The best part is that it works when I have the flu." I thought he was joking about being lazy. He was describing a category of income most people never build in an entire lifetime. Money that shows up whether or not you get out of bed. Picture 2 rooms. In the first, a man is working. Skilled hands, total focus. Genuinely excellent, and money enters that room only while his hands are moving. When he stops to eat, the money stops. When his back goes at 52, it stops, and it does not restart, and everybody tells him how sorry they are, and then everybody goes back to their own lives. In the second room, there's nobody in it at all, and money still arrives. Not passive against active, not lazy against hard-working, presence against system. Machiavelli's real obsession was never conquest, it was durability. The safety of a state, he argued, doesn't come from a prince who governs well while he's alive. It comes from one who arranges things so they hold after he's dead. A state that only functions while one brilliant man holds it together isn't a state. It's a performance, and every performance ends. Sarah Blakely started Spanx with a few $1,000s of her own savings and kept full ownership for years without outside investment. The detail that matters isn't the money, it's the structure. She wasn't renting her hours to anyone. She built something producing value in stores she wasn't standing in. Jay-Z's Arc says it from the other direction. The turn that mattered wasn't a better verse. It was the shift from being paid as the talent to owning the businesses the talent fed. Positions instead of fees. Same move both times. The person stopped being the product and became the owner of it. 2 nurses, both excellent, both 15 years in. One picks up every overtime shift offered. Her income is high, her competence is beyond question, and all of it rests on her body continuing to work exactly the way it works today. The other takes fewer shifts and spends 3 years building a certification course for nurses entering her specialty. It earns almost nothing for 2 years. It's humiliating, honestly. Next to the overtime checks she watches the first nurse take home. Year 4, it earns while she's on a beach. Year 7, it earns more than her salary. And she keeps nursing because she wants to, not because the mortgage requires her spine to hold together for another 11 years. If it stops when you stop, it was never a system. It was a job with better branding. Law 5. Make rotation do the walking. 2 consultants, 2 rooms, same Tuesday morning. The first is sending emails. 22 of them. Each carefully personalized, each a small act of hope dropped into an inbox where it will die unopened next to a receipt and a newsletter. He's good at his job. Genuinely good. And he spends most of his working life explaining that to strangers who didn't ask. The second is doing nothing. His phone rings. Someone he has never met describes a problem and asks what he charges. He names a number that would embarrass the first man. The caller says yes before lunch. The difference between those 2 rooms is not skill. One man has to travel to the work travels to the other. Machiavelli gave a whole chapter of The Prince to how a ruler comes to be esteemed, and his answer was not charm or self-promotion. It was visible, decisive action at a scale people cannot look away from. His example was Ferdinand of Aragon, who began as a minor king and made himself the most talked-about ruler in Christendom through great undertakings, one after another. Do something significant. Do it where it can be seen. Then let the story travel without you. Most people treat reputation like a mirror, a surface for admiration. Reputation is infrastructure. It's a road other people's money uses to reach you, and every year you maintain it, the road gets wider and cheaper to travel. Here's the part that stings. It's built from a small number of things done unusually well and visibly, not a large number done adequately and quietly. 10,000 invisible good deeds build very little you can stand on. One publicly excellent outcome builds a road. 2 contractors in the same town. The first is reliable for 20 years. Fair prices, solid work, never a complaint. Nobody knows his name outside the people who've already hired him. The second is reliable too. But early on he took one job everyone said was impossible. A burned-out building 3 other crews walked away from. He photographed every stage. He finished it. That project became a story people retold at dinner tables for a decade. And stories are close to the cheapest distribution ever invented, because other people carry them for free. 15 years later, the first man is still bidding. The second has a waiting list and turns down half of it, which lets him charge more, which funds better crews, which lengthens the list. That's not a career. That's a wheel that turns itself. Now somewhere less comfortable. Because a system that attracts money isn't only about what you build, it's about where you're standing when you build it. Law 6. Stand where everything must pass. There's a narrow pass in a mountain range. 30,000 men are marching toward it. Waiting on the other side is a force of a few hundred. On open ground, that fight is over in under an hour, and the few hundred are erased from history without a sentence written about them. But the pass is narrow. Only a handful can come through at once. And suddenly the number 30,000 means almost nothing, because the terrain decides how much of that army can actually be used. The rest are men standing in a line, waiting. This is the oldest idea in strategy, and the one people refuse to apply to their own income. The value of what you have depends heavily on where you're standing. Machiavelli's argument about learning the land runs on exactly this logic. Position converts a small force into a decisive one. A weak prince on strong ground often outlives a strong prince in open country. Tenza isn't a detail of the battle. Very often it is the battle. Florence gave him a live example. Cosimo de' Medici ran that city for 30 years without holding the title of ruler for most of them. He didn't need the title. He controlled the bank. He held the debts. He sat where the money, the marriages, the appointments, and the favors all had to cross. And men who technically outranked him found themselves negotiating with a private citizen. He never took the throne. He owned the corridor that led to it. So look at your own working life honestly. Are you on open ground, where what you offer is lined up beside 10,000 people offering something nearly identical, and the only lever left is being slightly cheaper or slightly more available on weekends? Or are you standing somewhere narrow? A brilliant photographer in a city full of brilliant photographers is in open country. That same photographer, as one of the very few who genuinely understands one industry's regulatory nightmare, is in the pass. Same camera, same eye, a different order of price. Two lawyers graduate the same year. One becomes a general practitioner, broad, capable, good with people, and competing with every other broad, capable, good with people lawyer within 100 miles, all writing the same website copy about why they're slightly better than the rest. The other picks something absurdly narrow, something nobody wants. The licensing rules for one category of medical device. For 4 years, it looks like a strange small choice. Then the industry grows, regulation tightens, and there are only a handful of people who really understand this thing end to end. He mostly stops competing on price, because there are few comparable bids to measure him against. The first lawyer sells hours in a market. The second is closer to being the market. Here's the uncomfortable part. Narrow ground almost always feels like a demotion at the beginning. It feels like shrinking, closing doors, betting your future on something too specific to matter, which is exactly why it stays empty. The discomfort is the fence. If it didn't hurt to walk in, the ground would already be crowded. Comment open or narrow below. And now the last law, the one that decides whether the other 6 do anything at all. Law 7, refuse the harvest. A farmer stands in a doorway at the end of a hard season, holding a handful of seed corn. He's hungry. His family is hungry. That corn is real food right now, and eating it tonight would solve a problem that is actually happening tonight. Plant it, and he eats nothing. He goes to bed hungry, stares at dirt for 4 months, and waits on weather he can't control for a harvest nobody has guaranteed him. Almost every fortune that lasted belongs to someone who planted the corn, and a great many hard-working broke people are people who ate it, not out of stupidity, because the hunger was real and the harvest was theoretical, and the human nervous system was not built to lose that argument. This is where most systems die, not from ignorance. People already know they should own instead of rent, build instead of borrow, stand narrow instead of open. They know. Then the first real money arrives, and they eat the seed, because a system that pays in 5 years cannot compete emotionally with a car that tonight in front of the neighbors. Machiavelli was scathing about princes who bought affection with lavish generosity, not because generosity is wrong, but because generosity funded by draining your reserves is a slow form of suicide. You spend to be admired. The admiration raises the standard, so you spend more, and eventually there's nothing left except your own people to squeeze. And the very spending that made them love you turns them against you. The prince who is careful with resources looks stingy for a season and stays secure for a reign. The one who looks magnificent is quietly consuming the thing keeping him alive. Now put that in a driveway. 2 people receive an unexpected $40,000 in the same month. The first upgrades his life. Better car, better apartment, a watch. And here's the part nobody warns you about. None of it feels reckless. Each purchase is defensible on its own. Each feels earned, and honestly, each one is earned. 18 months later, the money is gone. Worse than gone. His monthly cost of living has permanently risen, which means the next $40,000 is already spent before it arrives. He converted a windfall into a heavier cage, one reasonable decision at a time. The second man changes nothing visible. Same car, same apartment. He puts the money into ground, an ownership position, a small property, a business that runs without him standing in it. Nothing guaranteed, just positioned instead of consumed. For 18 months he looks exactly as unsuccessful as before, and a few people quietly assume the money never really happened. 10 years on, one has a lifestyle, the other has a machine. And machines tend to buy lifestyles. Here's the thing that should genuinely disturb you. The second man's advantage did not come from a better opportunity. Both were handed the identical door on the identical day. The difference was that one could tolerate looking ordinary for a decade. That's much of the skill. Not intelligence, not hustle, not information. You're getting the information right now, for free. The ability to sit inside the gap between planting and harvest without eating the seed. Wealth is often what's left after you stop buying proof that you have it. Comment seed or harvest below. 7 laws, one idea underneath all of them. The man who chases money is trying to catch something faster than he is. He'll spend 40 years running, and every year the thing he's chasing gets a little quicker while he gets a little slower, and at the end somebody will tell him he simply didn't want it badly enough. The man who builds a system stops running. He studies the ground. He sets his snares where things have to cross. And then he does the hardest thing a human being is capable of doing. He waits. Now, the part I promised you at the beginning. In 1512, the Medici returned to Florence, and Machiavelli lost everything he had built. 14 years service, gone in a week. Within months he was arrested on suspicion of conspiracy, and they tortured him with the strappado, arms tied behind the back, hoisted, dropped. He confessed to nothing, because there was nothing. They let him go and sent him out of the city. He ended up on a small farm outside Florence, selling timber and arguing with locals in a tavern over card games. And in a letter to a friend, he described his evenings. He would come in from the mud, take off the clothes he'd worn all day in the fields, and put on the robes he used to wear at court, properly dressed. Then he'd go into his study and read the ancients, and, in his words, speak with them, and ask them why they did what they did. Out of those evenings came The Prince. He wrote it hoping it would get him his job back. It didn't. He spent the rest of his life trying to return to the room where power was, and he never made it. He died in 1527 without the position he'd chased for 14 years, which means the last hunt of his life failed. But look at what he'd built without meaning to. The princes he wrote for are footnotes. The families who dismissed him are museum pieces. And 500 years later, on a Tuesday, a man in a car in a city Machiavelli could not have imagined is listening to his ideas about terrain and arms and patience. Generations after his death, they put a monument to him in a Florentine church and carved a line on it that says no eulogy is equal to such a name. He didn't die rich, he died positioned. He built the one thing that couldn't be confiscated, exiled, outvoted or taxed. And it has been earning ever since, in a currency his enemies never learned how to spend. So here's where all of this lands. The goal was never to become rich. Rich is a number, and numbers are fragile. They can be taxed, spent, stolen, inflated, lost in one bad year by someone else's decision. Chase the number, and you'll spend the second half of your life defending it from people you'll never meet. The goal is to become unavoidable. To stand somewhere so specific and so necessary that money doesn't need to be persuaded, or begged for, or hunted across a lifetime of exhausting weeks. It simply arrives, the way water arrives at the lowest point in a field. Not because it likes you, because you built the field that way. So stop asking how to get money. Start asking the harder question. The one that's difficult to sit with and harder to answer honestly. What would have to be true about me for money to have no other choice? Answer that, and you'll never chase anything again. If this shifted how you see your own position even slightly, don't stop here. What's in this video is the surface. There are deeper layers to influence, psychology and wealth that don't fit inside 20 minutes. If you want them, subscribe. Every video here is built to sharpen how you think, raise what you're worth, and put distance between you and the crowd. No noise, just strategy. Most people will finish this and go back to running. A few will stay and start building. Decide which one you are.